What is a life of privilege? This is the question we will be answering throughout this film. Due to our privilege, the 8th graders at the Watershed School have felt we needed to give back to the world. And so, we went to work at the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. But before we could do this, we had to educate ourselves on the Native American history and cultural sensitivities so as not to insult them.
Well, I mean, to characterize our behavior, and you're lumping everybody into that one behavior, right? So it's a stereotype.
When you think of a Native American, you think of a cowboy and an Indian fighting. You rarely think of them as down-to-earth, cultural, deep people. We have commercialized their culture and forced them into reservations that they do not want to be in. We learned a lot about Indian stereotypes and stereotypes they have towards us white people. Sue Churches was a big part of teaching us about these unfair stereotypes. She talked to us about the cultural sensitivities, the differences between cultures, and the negative and positive stereotypes for the Native Americans and the Anglo cultures.
They're really susceptible to alcoholism and diabetes.
I was going to say, like, savages.
On the positive side, I think people see them as being more respectful to the environment.
I guess, that they, like, feel that relationships are more important than time.
Okay, positives, even for us. We had education down there, didn't we?
Yeah. Another positive for us is it's like this idea that even if you come from a bad place in the U.S., you can still be successful.
Okay.
Like it's like the American dream.
More inventive.
You have opportunity. The difference between the cultures can be illustrated by these two symbols.
The circle, we believe, represents the Native American culture, a balanced or matriarchal society. It also could represent the Native American culture through the circle of life because they believe that everything is connected. The line, we believe, represents the American culture, a hierarchy and a patriarchy, with citizens that value time and work over relationships. To learn more about the poverty on Pine Ridge, we read an article by Harper's Magazine called Ghosts of Wounded Knee. In this article, they interviewed locals, mainly teenagers, about their lives on the reservation. Then we had a discussion on our thoughts and opinions.
Comments, thoughts, observations that we've had. Yeah, Jeffy.
It seems like a lot of these people just don't know what to do with their lives, and they can't think of anything to do with their lives because, all they've known is alcoholism, and, some people get chances, but they don't really know if they want them or they don't want to take these chances.
They all cursed a lot, and it seems like you can notice that the language is pretty bad, and that is kind of a sign of poverty.
What? Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was thinking about for everyone is what's the stereotype that comes to mind when a person uses curse words, every other word? Uneducated, violent, troublemaker. I'm wondering was there anything in this article that made you think, well, here's what they could do, here's how they could make it better, or does it feel in the same way to us, like, oh, wow, these guys are just doomed?
They could leave.
They could leave, right?
But like he said, it was like a lot of them have like warrants, or a lot of them did things that they weren't too proud of. So if they leave, the cops will pick them up or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was going through the statistics, it looked a little worse than the original statistics. Like we read, from 2000, It seemed even worse.
On Pine Ridge, there's 10 times more teenage suicide than the national average. 85 to 90% of the residents are unemployed. There's 800% more cervical cancer than the national average. 40% of the residents has type 2 diabetes. There's also 800% more TB than the national average.
A couple weeks before our immersion, we broke into 3 groups and read 3 different books. These books were Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee by D. Brown, In the Spirit of Crazy Horse by Peter Matheson, and Moon of the Popping Trees by Rex Allen Smith. To represent our learning from these books, we had to teach a 45-minute lesson about the books, themes, and concepts to the rest of the class.
In
in the spirit of Crazy Horse, and it was for the most part about how the FBI and the American Indian movement were pretty much fighting against each other for a lot of years in, I think, like the late 60s through the 70s to the early 80s. So right now we're working on our book presentation, and we're focusing on how there was much oppression on Pine Ridge at the time.
Me and Carson read the book Moon of Popping Trees by Rex Allen Smith, and it's about the Indian Wars from about 1865 until about 1890, and it ends with the massacre of Wounded Knee.
So our project, me and Carson's, is we did kind of like, part of it was the Indian Wars, and then also the ghost dance.
We're doing a presentation on our book, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. We have two main concepts, which is cultural destruction and broken promises. So we're working on cultural destruction and how to destroy their culture. They killed their chiefs.
And are you looking into the buffalo also?
Yes, right. The buffalo right now, for the broken promises, that's the one where we're going to talk about this pattern we see within each battle.
Here's a sample of one of the book presentations.
So we are the group that are doing Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, which is a book of the 1800s of the wars and squabbles between the Indians and the newcoming Americans.
I'm going to give a presentation on one of the most predominant Native American massacres in the history of the settling of the West. It was called the Sand Creek Massacre. Under the direction of Colonel J.M. Shivington, the United States government massacred over 180 Native Americans, breaking the truce written by the United States government, stating that the Native Americans would be safe if they stayed on the banks of Sand Creek in Colorado.
So I'm going to be talking about two wars. The first one I'm going to be talking about is the one to save the buffaloes, and the other one I'll be talking about the war to keep the Black Hills.
To further decimate the Native American culture, the United States killed 80 million wild bison. This in turn struck a major blow to their culture because the buffalo was a major spiritual icon. Another broken promise by the United States government were the Pahasapas, the Black Hills. The Black Hills, according to the Lakota, are the origin of their people, and therefore very spiritually significant. Taking these lands caused starvation, relocation of many tribes, and the loss of another spiritual icon.
I'm talking about vital chiefs.
In this part of the presentation, we discuss two major chiefs in Native American history, Red Cloud and Sitting Bull. When these chiefs were killed, the spirit of many tribes were broken, forcing them to accept the government's term and move on to disease-ridden reservations.
As part of our presentation, we split the class into two groups, the government commissioners and several Indian chiefs. The commissioners bargained for the Black Hills so they could extract gold. These books have helped us learn the truth behind the settling of the West. The buffalo is a major symbol in the Indian culture. So to destroy the Indian culture, the American government destroyed the buffalo. To learn more about this issue, Justine Sanchez came in and talked to us.
Phil Sheridan, which I think you guys read about Phil Sheridan or talked about him. He was definitely mentioned in Bury My Heart. And this is in 1870s, and he's praising the buffalo hunters, and he says, of the buffalo hunters, these men have done more in the last 4 years to settle the vexed Indian question than the entire regular army has done in the last 40 years. Let them kill, skin, and sell until the buffaloes are exterminated. Then your prairies can be covered with speckled cattle.
Up to today, the buffalo living on Yellowstone National Park are being hazed and even killed. When the buffaloes stray past the park's border, Montana has the right to haze them back into Yellowstone. The reason Montana is uptight is because of their cattle. They are worried that the buffalo will disease their booming industry. To help save innocent buffalo, the Buffalo Field Campaign believe they have the right to leave Yellowstone National Park.
With the knowledge of cultural sensitivity at our disposal, the 8th graders at the Watershed School set out for Pine Ridge, where we would begin our week-long service project for the Native Americans.